welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into something fascinating. The prophecies, the expectations that were swirling around the birth of Siddhartha Gautama, who would become the Buddha.
Absolutely. It's a pivotal moment.
We've got some great material here from Prophecies of the Buddha's Dawn. And what we want to do really is dig into what these predictions tell us. You know, about the time, the place, and what people were thinking about this extraordinary figure about to arrive.
It's crucial to picture the context. Ancient India back then wasn't static at all. It was this incredibly vibrant place, intellectually, spiritually. You had seers, sages, thinkers, all actively trying to read the signs, trying to answer the big questions. The source calls it spiritual ferment, which I think captures it perfectly.
Spiritual ferment, I like that. So people were already asking big questions, looking for answers.
Exactly. Lots of different schools of thought popping up, a real sense of seeking.
Okay, so let's talk about these anticipated figures. The texts mention two main types people were sort of expecting, right?
Yeah, two big ones. First, the Chakravartin. This was envisioned as a universal monarch, a righteous ruler who'd bring justice and order to the whole world.
A world ruler, okay? And the second?
The second was the Sammasambuddha, the perfectly self-enlightened one, someone who finds the path to liberation all on their own. Completely independent discovery.
Wow. That's quite a split, isn't it? Yeah. Worldly power versus, pure spiritual enlightenment.
It really is. And it makes you think, what were the deepest hopes of that society? Was it, immediate relief from suffering through a just king?
Or something deeper.
Or that more profound, maybe existential need for meaning, for a way out of the cycle of rebirth, which was a big concept then. Maybe they weren't even seen as totally separate hopes.
Maybe a just world was needed for people to even think about enlightenment.
Perhaps. It's definitely a fascinating duality in their expectation.
Okay, this brings us to Queen Maya's dream. This is probably one of the most famous stories. The source details it quite vividly.
It's incredible imagery. A magnificent white elephant.
White, signifying purity.
Purity, strength, yes. And it's carrying a white lotus. Another powerful symbol, right? Enlightenment.
And it enters her side in the dream.
Yeah.
So how did people interpret that? The Brahmins, the seers?
Well, their take was that this was huge. It meant her son had immense potential. He could become one of those two figures we just talked about.
Either the great Chakravartin emperor.
Or the enlightened Buddha, the Sammasambuddha. The potential was seen right there, even before birth. It's quite striking.
Immense potential. It really highlights their view of destiny, maybe.
Yeah.
That this wasn't just any birth.
Exactly. It wasn't just some random dream. It was seen as a profound omen, packed with meaning that resonated with their whole culture. And the fact that the interpretation offered these two really different paths, it just underlines how extraordinary they believed this child would be. It wasn't just predicting a future, but recognizing a destiny that would change things dramatically, whichever way it went.
Okay, and then there's the story of the sage Asita. This one's really moving.
It is. So Asita hears about the prince being born, and he immediately goes to the palace, drops everything.
Right. And he sees the baby, Siddhartha, and his reaction is, it's complicated.
It really is. He smiles first, a big knowing smile. But then
he starts weeping. Why? What was going on there?
Well, his own explanation is key. He saw the signs on the infant, physical marks they believed indicated greatness, and he recognized this child was the one who would become a Buddha.
So the smile was recognition, joy.
Profound joy, yes. Recognition of this huge event happening. But the tears were personal. He realized he was old. He knew he probably wouldn't live long enough to actually hear the Buddha's teachings once they were discovered and shared. He'd miss out on learning the path from the source.
Wow. So joy for the world, but sorrow for himself. That's powerful.
It really highlights the weight, the significance they attach to this, not just for Asita, but it hints at something bigger.
Yeah. The source mentions this, suggests a widespread belief in a coming spiritual awakening. It wasn't just Asita feeling this way.
Seems like it. It suggests people were already looking, maybe even actively hoping, for some kind of major spiritual shift, a leader, a new understanding.
So these prophecies, they weren't just fortune-telling in isolation.
Not at all. They were reflecting something deeper that was already stirring in the culture. And they did more than just predict. They actively shaped things.
How so?
Well, think about it. These stories passed around, they created a kind of collective expectation, a shared feeling that, something big was coming.
A readiness.
Exactly. A sense of readiness for maybe a radical shift in understanding existence, suffering, and the path to true peace, as the source puts it. The culture was kind of primed.
Like laying the groundwork. These stories acted as what? A beacon of hope. Especially in a worldview grappling with suffering, with rebirth.
Precisely, a beacon of hope. The message underneath was sort of, answers were coming. A way out of suffering would be revealed. You could almost feel that sense of waiting, of hope.
Which must have made it easier for people to accept the Buddha's teachings later on.
Absolutely, that's a crucial point. It created fertile ground. When Siddhartha finally did start teaching, his message landed in a society that had, in a way, been prepared for centuries. The expectation was already there.
It really makes you think about our own time. Do we have similar kinds of collective hopes or expectations floating around now?
The source kind of hints at that, doesn't it? Drawing parallels to maybe our modern search for solutions, for global problems or breakthroughs in understanding ourselves, finding well-being.
Yeah, like this deep human impulse to believe things can get fundamentally better. Are our anxieties and hopes today maybe creating fertile ground for certain types of ideas or leaders to emerge?
It's a really compelling thought. The Buddha story definitely reminds us how powerful collective expectation can be. When a society is sort of yearning together, it creates this space, this receptivity for major change.
So putting it all together, Siddhartha's birth.
Yeah.
It wasn't just, a baby being born.
Far from it. The source says it beautifully. It was the manifestation of centuries of spiritual longing.
The fulfillment of deep-seated prophecies.
And crucially, the beginning a revolutionary journey. Not just for him, but for how people understood life itself.
A new dawn, really.
A new dawn. So maybe a concluding thought is just to reflect on that power of expectation, how much we humans crave meaning, liberation.
And how the arrival of someone offering a path, especially one that's been anticipated, can have such a massive impact.
Exactly. The anticipation itself becomes part of the power.
Okay, so on that note, here's something for you, our listener, to maybe think about. What about our current collective hopes? Our anticipations, the things we're all sort of looking towards or wishing for?
How might those be shaping the ground right now?
Yeah. What kind of transformative ideas or maybe even figures might be taking shape, just waiting for the right conditions to emerge in our time? Something to ponder. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.